Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everybody. I would now open the meeting. Welcome to the 106th meeting of the Standing Committee on Acadian Heritage. This meeting is being held in the territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin Anishinaabe. Today's meeting will happen in a hybrid format in accordance with the regulations, and you may participate in person or via Zoom.
Again, I'm going to go over the usual messaging. Please, you're not mandated to wear a mask, but please wear one because it helps. Him is still on his own because it helps to protect you and your colleagues. Also, when you're not allowed to take any photographs of your meeting on the net, you can find it later on. It'll be posted. When you speak, address yourself through the chair. And then also remember that the audio system is very sensitive, so please ensure that you don't have other devices sitting next to your computer so that we get feedback, because that's pretty hard on the ears of the interpreters. And that's about it. We're dealing today with looking at tech giants and their role okay. All right. We're dealing with the tech giants and their role in actually going against government's bills, et cetera, et cetera. So we have 6 witnesses. One of them is not here yet, so when he comes on, the clerk will suspend for a minute and we will bring him on and test him. But we start this morning with Joan Donovan, who is an expert in disinformation and in misinformation online from Boston University College of Communication. We have George Reichelis, Director Associate for this group. Corporate Europe Observatory, Bram Franken, who is online. Internet Society Canada chapter, Philip Palmer, will be coming on a little bit later. And then we have Open Media, Matthew Hatfield, who is the Executive Director, and Village Media, who is the Director General, Chef Elgi. So what we do is we begin, and you each have 5 minutes as a group, not as a person. So if there are 2 of you, you're going to have to split the 5 minutes. I will give you a 30-second shout-out so that you know that you can wrap up what you're doing. Even if you cannot finish what you wanted to say, there's always an opportunity during the question period for you to plug your bit in. So we begin now with Joan Donovan. Ms. Donovan, for 5 minutes, please.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the invitation to testify at this hearing. I'm Dr. Joan Donovan, and I've spent my career studying harmful online campaigns, including mis and disinformation and media manipulation. I'm an assistant professor at the Boston University's College of Communications, and until recently, I worked for Harvard Kennedy School of Government as the research director of the Shorenstein Center and the director of the Technology and Social Change Research Project, also known as TASK. TASK focused on online media manipulation campaigns and influence operations by bad actors, including adversarial nations running mis and disinformation campaigns, skewing public discourse, and seeding hate, violence, and incitement online, and of course, undercutting democracy's free and fair elections. Before Harvard, I led my research at Data and Society, a nonprofit where me and my team mapped how social institutions were intentionally disrupted through online campaigns. I chose to join Harvard after a lengthy recruitment period because they convinced me they would support this work at scale. And as we know, governments around the world and the public have come to rely on my work as well as many other researchers in this field. But from my work, they've learned who is behind COVID misinformation, especially the calls for hydroxychloroquine. We also have learned what domestic and foreign operatives are doing to create division in communities, and explaining the behavior of 81 countries that deploy cyber troops to manipulate public opinion online. I've worked with the WHO and the CDC on strategies to mitigate medical misinformation. And most recently, I've worked with the Canadian Election Misinformation Project at McGill University. In my whistleblower disclosure submitted on my own behalf by Whistleblower Aid, my team's groundbreaking research in this field was ground to a halt in obeisance to Facebook by the dean of Harvard Kennedy School, a man now known for his deference to donor interests. In short, in October 2021, a well-known Facebook fixer became enraged in a donor meeting when I told the group I had Frances Haugen's entire cache of internal Facebook documents, and that I planned to create a public, collaborative, and archive of them. I said they were the most important documents in internet history. This donor and Facebook PR executive attacked everything I said at that meeting. He said he and Facebook affiliated donors have powerful influence at Harvard. And so that was the start of the Kennedy School's campaign to stop my work and create unceasing misery for my research team. When Harvard received a donation of $500 million from Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the fate of my research was sealed. HKS killed the task project and fired me after silencing me and my team for 2 years. Courtney Radich testified here that the tech giant intimidation includes researchers and academics and furthers weaponization of the big tobacco and big oil playbooks, silencing and skewing research, protecting their profits and their lies to the public. But unlike the censorship campaigns of those before them, tech giants have more tools in their disposal because they control the information landscape and the data about it. Meta's actions in Canada, for instance, to fight C18 have deprived Canadians of more than 5 million news interactions a day, according to McGill's Media Ecosystem Observatory. So you see the damage of their for-profit motivation acutely in Canada. And as Imran Ahmed from the Center for Countering Digital Hate testified here, we know that bad actors fill the vacuum when credible news and information leave them with little else to look at. When a school like Harvard is complicit in corporate direction of research, what can protect those of us who work to document, analyze, and share the truth? As others have noted, Facebook's actions to avoid accountability
30
has
seconds,
targeted
please.
legislators, regulators in US and Canada. I do want to close by saying this, that I support the Online Algorithm Transparency Act, known as C-292 here in Canada, and the similar legislation introduced in New Zealand, the UK, and the European Union. I was raised with the deepest conviction that I'm responsible for the consequences of my actions, and tech giants must be too. As an academic, I have a moral obligation to tell the truth then and now. Thank you very much.
Very much, Ms. Donovan. And I did not even go to a party last night, guys, but I even forgot what the topic was this morning. So excuse me, I'm going to say for the record what the topic is. Tech giants' current and ongoing use of intimidation and subversion tactics to evade regulation in Canada and around the world. So now the next speaker, the next witness is from the Corporate Europe Observatory, Bram Franken. Mr. Franken, 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, many thanks for the invitation. So my name is Bram Franken. I'm a researcher and campaigner at Corporate Europe Observatory, CEO. And CEO is a Brussels-based research group working to expose and challenge the privileged access enjoyed by corporations and their lobby groups in EU policy making. So I'll be discussing big tech's lobbying power and the tactics it uses in Europe specifically. So large digital corporations have grown enormously in size, wealth, and influence over the past 2 decades. And the more our economies become digitalized, the more power big tech accrues. Big tech has increasingly monopolized our access to the internet, plays a critical role in our online interactions, in the way we access information and the way we consume. Yet its business model is problematic. It's based on aggressive surveillance advertising and data extraction, deploying social recommender systems that amplify disinformation and hateful content, and in promoting unaccountable and unfair artificial intelligence programs. Together with its economic power, big tech's political power has increased as well. And the aim of big tech and its allies seem to be to make sure that there are as few hard regulations as possible to preserve their profit margins and business model. If new rules cannot be blocked, then they aim to at least water them down. I will expand now a bit on the key factors explaining big tech's lobbying power. And first of all, I will look at its lobbying spending, which already gives a first indication. And just to give a quick overview, our research shows that in the EU, 651 groups and business associations are lobbying the EU's digital policies. And together they spend 113 million euros annually lobbying the European Union, making tech, the digital sector, one of the biggest lobbying sectors in Europe. However, the large tech corporations such as Google, Amazon, and Meta are primarily responsible for the increase in lobby spending we have seen in the last couple of years. The top 10 digital corporations alone spend a total of 40 million euros a year on lobbying. To take a specific example, Facebook is now spending 8 million euros a year, making it the company with the biggest lobbying budget in the EU. And just 10 years ago, that was only 450,000 euros. So we're speaking about an increase with a factor of 17 in just a decade. These numbers, by the way, only cover EU lobbying. Big tech also has invested heavily in lobbying in the national states, of which data is often not accessible. So what does big tech use this money for? It has used this massive funding to build a very extensive network of lobby groups, lobby consultancies, and provides funding to think tanks and universities. This wide network serves as a gigantic lobbying echo chamber, which constantly plays a variation of the same tune. Regulation will damage the economy, will damage innovation, and will be bad for small and medium enterprises. By funding these organizations, big tech buys access to policymakers, or as an anonymous tech lobbyist recently stated in Politico, quote, the official pitch is you sponsor me, I organize an event for you. The unofficial pitch is you sponsor me, I give you access to this or that member of parliament. Close quote. In 2020, a leaked Google lobby strategy document already highlighted Google's approach, which was first of all mobilize third parties such as think tanks and academics to echo Google's messages, and second, reframe the political narrative around costs to the economy and consumers. Recently, there has been increasing attention for an especially insidious way of lobbying, whereby big tech has funded organizations claiming to represent SMEs, startups, and software developers. These organizations' lobbying positions are conspicuously close to those of big tech. In one case, Apple provided more than half of the funding for an organization claiming to represent app developers. And in another well-documented case, it was found that many of the member companies of that big tech-funded SME trade association did not know they were a member and definitely did not agree with the position of that trade association. The rising lobby firepower of big tech mirrors the sector's increasing market dominance. And it is extremely problematic that these platforms can use its never-ending reserves of funding to ensure that their voices are heard over those of countervailing or critical voices. There are steps we can take, however. We should protect the decision-making process from privileged access by big tech.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm almost done, thanks. For example, by limiting the access these companies have to decision makers. At the same time, the policymakers should reach out to those who do not have the resources to make themselves heard, such as SMEs, civil society, independent researchers, and local groups. And I think the panel discussion of today is a very good example of that. So I will stop here. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vranken. I now go to Georges Ricalis, who is Associate Director of the European Policy Center. Mr. Ricolas, for 5 minutes, please. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ricolas is all fine. Thank you for that. So, Madam Chair, honourable members, thank you for the invitation. My name is Geir Ricolas. I worked for 11 years in the European Commission, notably on digital regulation and trade files. My current position is that of Associate Director of the European Policy Centre, one of Brussels' leading think tanks. But I do emphasize I am testifying entirely in a personal capacity. In this introductory statement, I would like to make 3 points. 1, what I have observed. 2, how I think we must understand it. And 3, what I recommend. First point, what I have observed. My experience of an encounter with the big tech platforms from inside the EU over the past 14, 15 years suggests that EU policymaking is and has been in the grip of big tech and their networks of influence. I have sought to document this as regards the EU's legislative debates on the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act, the DSA, DMA. As references, I've written about this publicly in The Guardian. I saw firsthand how EU's tech giants seduced the EU and undermined democracy, and in a longer piece on Medium, which I've called Technopolis, how big tech frauds EU democracy. It is true that these 2 texts, the DSA and the DMA, will allow Europe for the first time to neutralize some of the harms caused by internet platforms. But I think it's also very important to be attentive to that the compromises made in getting there in the end also reflect the extraordinary power of tech companies to influence decision making. And I think we saw under these legislative processes campaigns of direct and hidden lobbying of a brazenness and scale that one should be very attentive to, and which in my view are totally out of line with applicable codes of conduct for interest representation, also the most basic behavioral principles in society. As much of the debate in Canada has been on the Online News Act, I thought I should take 2 examples of such tactics from equivalent discussions in the EU, one had in the context of the copyright reform directives a few years back. These relate, first of all, to the use of front groups and alliances. One example under the copyright debates is that one of the most vocal stakeholder coalitions in Brussels was something called C4C, the Coalition for Creativity, which represented all from public libraries to digital rights organizations. It turned out ex post that this coalition was financed by the Computer and Communications Industry Association, i.e. financed indirectly by Google and other platforms, and the coordinator was by chance also a consultant for Google. Another example is an organization that is still active. It's called the European Independent Media Publishers. If you go to their website, it says it is a platform that represents over 1,000 media outlets across Europe. What this website did not say when it was created was that this is entirely set up and financed by Google. And I discovered this when I was reached out to by a consultancy company, asked whether I wanted to do some hidden lobbying and think tanking for them. Since this has been called out, they have now added on the website that the European Independent Media Publishers is partnering with and is sponsored by Google. So those are 2 examples of the use of front groups, alliances, and astroturfing. The second major way of leveraging their power and gaining influence is, of course, using the powers that the platforms have directly. When the EU was trying to regulate the user-generated content and also confer ancillary copyrights on press published in 2018-2019, big tech was directly corralling protesters to the barricades. I can take one example, notably YouTube's chief executive, Susan Wojcicki, who crassly told YouTube creators in a letter that the legislation posed a threat to both their livelihood and their ability to share their voice, threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs, and also threatening freedom of expression and the web as we know it. Of course, as we know, in the end, the European Commission, the EU, prevailed. The copyright directive took effect across Europe 2 years ago, and I leave it to everyone to judge on the substantiation of Google's dramatic warning that it would change the web as we know it. How should we understand this? Well, I think my own experience here I'm pointing to shines very well to what Bram was referring to in this Google memo leaked in November 2020 containing
30 seconds.
Tactics. I will wrap up a list of tactics to undermine EU legislation. As the previous speaker also mentioned, to big tobacco, as public scrutiny and research has uncovered in the case of big tobacco, outside vested interests create whole ecosystems of thought, influence, and subversion to manipulate society and policymakers. And I think it's very interesting to go back to the landmark study of the World Health Organization on tobacco industry interference with tobacco control, which summarizes what these tactics can look like. And we also see in the area of big tech. It's about lobbying, it's about framing the narrative, it's about creating alliances, setting up front groups and astroturfing campaigns. It's about influencing or buying think tanks and academics. It's about hospitality. It's about political support and funding. It's using philanthropy. It's also about litigation and intimidation and about the use of international pressure. I see this time's out, so I'll end there, and I can possibly come back to what I recommend in the context of the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reichlis. And then I go to Matthew Hatfield, Executive Director of Open Media. Mr. Hatfield, 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Matt Hatfield, and I'm Executive Director of Open Media, a grassroots community of nearly 280,000 people in Canada that work together for an open, accessible, and surveillance-free internet. I'm speaking to you today from the unceded territory of the Tsawwatte Nation. So this hearing came from Bill C-18's hearing, and I'm happy to answer questions about how that bill has landed and what must come next. But in listening to exchanges you've had with witnesses before today, it seems to me this hearing's topic seems to have become pinning down what's wrong with big tech platforms.
Excuse me, could you slow down for the interpreters? Thank you.
Certainly, apologies. It seems to me this hearing's topic seems to be pinning down what's wrong with tech platforms and what our government can do about it. I'm going to try and answer that question very precisely for you. What's wrong with tech platforms and their influence on society? 3 things: their size, their vast asymmetrical data compared to regulators and citizens, and the engagement algorithms that drive their business model. Let's talk size. Platforms like Amazon and Google have a stranglehold on a huge share of internet commerce, app purchases, advertising, and more. They often use that power to set unfair terms vis-a-vis smaller businesses and consumers. They all note that Bill C-18 misunderstood the specific dynamic around news and assumes news had inherent value to platforms that, for Meta at least, it does not. The good news about this size problem is that Canada is opening new possibilities to do something about it through competition reforms in Bill C-56 and 59. In the US, several bills were proposed last year aimed at regulating how tech giants treat small businesses and consumers, including the American Innovation and Choice Online Act and the Open App Markets Act, both of which Open Media campaigned for. In Canada, our Competition Bureau has never had the legal basis to study platform power effectively, let alone change it. Soon they will. Now to my second point, data asymmetry and privacy. Platforms like Meta and YouTube have an endless volume of sensitive data about each and every one of us. They use it for advertising, to feed recommendations, but not for much else. Partly that's to respect our privacy, and that's a very good thing. Their data in the hands of a spy agency or law enforcement would be a dystopic surveillance nightmare, and one we must guard against. That lack of curiosity on platforms' part is also self-serving. It makes it easy to bury accurate study of what may be going wrong for some of their users, and in the worst case, lead that minority to harm themselves or others. The limited research that exists on how platform models may sometimes amplify harms is done with very incomplete data or with crumbs of researcher data access, which platforms are quick to withdraw if their interests are threatened. Here we need both individual and structural remedy. The strongest possible privacy bill, C-27, giving Canadians meaningful and unalienable control of our personal data is one solution, but a very strong provision for both regulator and approved academic researcher access to perform studies on platform data in our upcoming online harms bill must be another. We can't intelligently regulate platforms if we don't understand how any harms they help produce actually occur. Last but not least, let's talk about the algorithm. Without even noticing it, we've become a society in which most information we get is delivered because it keeps us scrolling and clicking, not because it is nuanced, well-researched, or true. For music or hobbies, that can be a wonderful tool of self-exploration. People are not passive consumers of our feed. We curate it heavily, pruning the algorithm to serve us what we like most. But for facts and reporting, the same process is making us a less informed, angrier, and more polarized society. We all feel the impact, and very few of us like it. But that doesn't make solutions easy, although I would say C-292, Peter Julian's bill, is something worth considering here. I'll give a couple signposts for what might help, though. So we welcome this community's interest in a dedicated study of how to create a viable news sector in Canada that continues producing vetted information. There's a case that Canadian news needs permanent government support. But the more involved government becomes, the more urgent it is that funds move through a system that is fully transparent to the public, has clear and fair criteria for who gets what support, and prioritizes funds where they're most needed, in local news deserts and to public accountability journalism, not shoveling funds indifferently towards Bell or the CBC. The alternative of stacking complex funding band-aids one on top of the other until they represent the majority of news funding is not going to build public trust in truthful journalism. We would also welcome a Canadian study of how social media algorithms are impacting society. But regulating the algorithm, if it comes, must be aimed at expanding transparency and personal control over how it works for Canadian internet
30
users,
seconds.
not manipulating it for what the government thinks is best for us. Over 12,000 members of our community asked you for fixes to C18, and over 20,000 of us raised concerns about the government's first online harms proposal. But that's far from the extent of our community's interest in tech platforms. Over 9,000 open media community members have demanded more anti-harassment tools and control of our data on online platforms, and nearly 34,000 of us have signed actions demanding data protections and regulating the data broker industry. I look forward to discussing any of these important platform issues with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. I go to Jeff Elgie, Chief Executive Officer of Village Media. Mr. Elgie? I hope you're Mr. Elgie and not Mr. Elgie.
You got it right the first time. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I'll apologize if my comments are not directly aligned with the title of the session. However, I was asked specifically to come today to provide our perspective on Bill C-18 and the Online News Act. As a brief introduction, I'm the CEO of Village Media. Headquartered in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, we began with one local news publication and 2 journalists just 10 years ago. Today, we own and operate 25 news publications in Ontario and employ approximately 150 Canadians, 90 of which are journalists. Beyond operating local news sites, Village has developed Made in Canada technology for the publishing sector. This technology now runs our own publications along with those of Glacier Media, Dougal Media, Great West Newspapers, Black Press Media, and others. And as of now, we power almost 150 news websites across Canada. As you may know, I spoke in front of the Senate Standing Committee on Transport and Communications related to Bill C-18 back in May. My position since has not materially changed. To briefly summarize, we believe the bill and the Online News Act was flawed from the get-go, where it suggested that platforms such as Google and Meta steal our content and provide no meaningful value in exchange. We argued that this couldn't be further from the truth. The truth is that we, including all news publishers, willingly place or allow for snippets of our content to appear on the platforms because we benefit tremendously from the traffic we get from them. For Village Media, it helped us grow and launch 25 publications and develop a profitable and sustainable model for local news. I'm here today to speak to some of the impacts of the Online News Act. It is my belief that we have now created a number of scenarios where in many cases news publishers may come out behind. For large publishers, those in particular that had deals with each of Google and Meta, including Village Media, I expect that some of us will be ahead and some of us will be behind financially. While these deals are covered under non-disclosure agreements, it seems apparent that by having a smaller pool of expected funds from Google of $100 million and by having 0 funds available from Meta, it is quite possible that the ultimate value of the Google deals may in fact be less than the prior deals between both platforms. For small publishers, including startup and independent publishers that did not have deals with either platform, there is much yet still to be determined as we wait for the final regulations to be released. First, will they qualify? And second, how much will they receive if so? If you asked many of those small publishers if they would prefer to receive some amount per journalist that may theoretically equate to approximately $10,000 per year, or have their Meta traffic back, I would expect many would prefer to have their Meta traffic back. And this is the scenario for Village Media. Even the best case scenario for the Google deal still likely does not make up for the value lost of the traffic for Meta. That traffic allowed us to monetize our publications more effectively, develop new audiences, subscribers, and followers that we would otherwise be challenged to reach. Facebook, in particular, was one of the best on-ramps to new publications that we have found, and we have tested many. In the absence of Meta, sustainably launching new sites or even sustaining recently launched sites might no longer be possible. But this problem goes beyond my own self-interest. As an even worse outcome, Canadians are now no longer exposed to news in Facebook and Instagram. And at a time when voter turnout is at record lows and we can expect to be flooded with misinformation through technologies like generative AI, the missing voices of Canadian journalists in these environments will no doubt be damaging to our society. In our 10 years of operation, Village has gone into each year with an expectation of growth and continued sustainability. We're profitable. We reinvest our profits by expanding into new communities and growing our newsrooms. However, as of April of this year, in anticipation of the outcome of the Online News Act, and for the first time ever, our company has paused almost all new hiring and suspended new community launch plans. The potential outcome of the Online News Act has substantially impacted our progress. Thank you for having me.
Very much. We'll now suspend for just a short time to get Mr. Palmer online. Thank you. Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, honorable members. Thank you for this opportunity to address you this morning. The Internet Society Canada chapter is an independent, not-for-profit corporation that advocates for an open, accessible, safe, and affordable Internet. We accept some regulation of the Internet and its participants is necessary and welcome. And we have heard nothing this morning that we disagree with from the various panelists who have spoken. However, extreme care has to be taken in formulating regulatory policies to attain the best results for Canadians. The Internet is the most revolutionary societal disruptor since the invention of printing. And those disruptions are occurring at warp speed. Its reach is global, as are its impacts. The Internet features both beacons of light and cesspools of depravity. Its more positive aspects further the goals of an enlightened humanity. Its worst aspects are a challenge to liberal democratic values and all societal and legal norms. Social media is often marred by shockingly bad behavior. It can transmit misinformation, disinformation, and discouraged reasoned debate, and constrain the participation of members of civil society as a result of racism, misogyny, threats, and intimidation. Where is Canada as the world confronts the many challenges that arise from the Internet? Canada is a small country, economically open to the world, and dependent on its relations with its peer countries. The Internet and Internet-based services are the key to Canada's continued integration into the global economy. It is critical for Canada to thrive and for her citizens to prosper that Canada approach the Internet and its regulation with some humility. Canada is too small in population and in wealth to establish the norms by which the Internet will be regulated or how Internet service providers will govern themselves. If Canada overreaches and imposes unrealistic economic and social costs on Internet services, it may find its businesses and citizens cut off from the services and knowledge that are available to its peers. Canada has already proposed or adopted counterproductive Internet-related measures, 2 of which were studied by this committee. The Online Streaming Act, rather than bringing Canada's Broadcasting Act into line with the world of Internet-based services, attempts to bring the Internet into the walled garden of the Canadian broadcasting regulatory system. The Online News Act attempts to extort payments from Internet platforms to subsidized news producers. This committee's present study was inspired by its work on Bill C-18 and Google and Facebook's reaction to it. We maintain that C-18 is deeply flawed. It has already had foreseeably negative impacts upon Canadian news businesses and Canadian consumers of news. Choice of whether to provide Canadians with access to news and so be subject to the Act, or to withdraw from Canadian news ecosystem, comes down to a business decision. Meta announced early that it would withdraw from the Canadian news market if C-18 was adopted. This was not intimidation. It was a lawful and rational business decision. The withdrawal of Meta from the Canadian news space has proved a hardship for Canadian news producers. If Meta's withdrawal is a hardship, Google's withdrawal from the Canadian news ecosystem would be catastrophic for Canadian news businesses and the Canadian public. We welcome the agreement reached between Google and Canadian Heritage. It promises to avoid that catastrophe. Nothing we say here today should be construed as approving the activities of the tech giants, a term that encompasses not only the large international behemoths, but also our domestic giants.
30 seconds.
Bell, Rogers, TELUS, that dominate domestic markets and extract casino profits from Canadian consumers. It is good to see that Canada's focus on competition law reform. There are a number of experiments underway in democratic societies that deal with internet and tech regulation that Canada can learn from, emulate, or cooperate with. It is critical that thoughtful policies be crafted that recognize the unique characteristics of the internet, and they put up the full value of internet-based services for Canadians. Poor regulatory policies will harm Canada and Canadians. Thank you very much.
Mr. Palmer. Now we're going to go to the question and answer part of this committee. The first round will be 6 minutes, and it includes questions and answers, so please be as terse as you possibly can be. We now begin with the Conservatives. Rachel Thomas for 6 minutes. Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you to each of the witnesses for taking time out of your morning and just being able to provide us with important information here today. My first question is for you, Mr. Palmer. We had the Heritage Minister here at committee just a couple of weeks ago, and she stated that the CBC currently employs 1/3 of all journalists in Canada. And based on the regulatory framework being outlined for the Google deal of $100 million, that money will be divvied up based on the number of journalists a company or a news outlet employs. Do you believe that the CBC should be included in this deal?
Frankly, I think that the most important thing that can come out of this is actually an examination of the role of CBC in news. The CBC's mandate is now nearly 100 years old, and it has not changed significantly over time. The CBC's role in Canadian news is obviously significant, but how it relates to other Canadian news partners, I think is critical to the future of the news business in Canada. From my own perspective, and I think of our societies, we do not favor the Google funds going to the CBC at this time. We do think that the mandate review is essential to carry forward in a balanced manner, given the challenges that the news industry faces in Canada. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Elgie, I'll ask you the same question. I'm curious, should the CBC be included in this deal and therefore receive about 1/3 of all funding?
Thank you for the question. I was actually asked that question by the CBC on Power and Politics, and I did say that I didn't think it seemed reasonable. The CBC currently receives a generous contribution from the federal government of approximately $1.2 billion. And even if you break that down and distill it, it's roughly almost equal to about $150,000 for each of the 3,000 journalists of the 8,000 staff that they have. It seems that they have a massive advantage. It also, the CBC also does compete with the private sector for digital advertising in particular, and we feel that this money is much best directed to the private sector.
Thank you. Mr. Hatfield, in one of the articles that you've written, I'll directly quote, you said with regards to Bill C-18, quote, it puts media under the thumb of government and platforms, encourages the spread of poor quality journalism, and does nothing to rejuvenate local media. Do you care to expand on that statement?
Certainly. I mean, I think some of those concerns are what we're going to be looking for when we assess the final regulatory agreement that Heritage reaches with Google. I'm concerned that the government has essentially tried to create public support for news on the cheap without doing some of the work of establishing a truly transparent, open system to provide that support. Kind of strong-arming platforms into forming agreements with news was an attempt to create the system without going through sort of that hard transparency work. And I'm very concerned that in the final agreement, a group like Google will actually have considerable discretion over who is getting support and who doesn't. It's either Google will have a lot of discretion or a government-appointed body will have a lot of discretion or both. And I think Canadians deserve better. I think we need a system where it's very clear on what terms support's being allocated and who's getting it.
So, Mr. Hatfield, on that note then, in your estimation, what would be the best way to restore news media to a place where it's producing diverse news, independent news, and in a place of healthy thriving? What would that look like in the nation of Canada? What would it take to restore media to that place?
So I welcome this committee doing a study because I think it's an open question whether we need some dedicated government support. I think there's a strong case that some types of journalism are not commercially viable that we need. But I don't think the CBC should be sort of cannibalizing the funding that we need for a diversity of sources. And I think one logical conclusion of that study is going to be we need to be addressing areas that not just have struggling news organizations, but may have no news organization now. We need to ensure that any dedicated support is reaching those kind of areas. And under C-18, we get precisely the opposite. The funding is going primarily to news organizations that to some degree are already succeeding and still exist.
Mr. Hatfield, when the money continues to flow to legacy media instead of supporting independent, local, or ethnic media, what does that do to diversity in our country?
I mean, I think it reduces it. It reduces sort of both the innovation and representation of different voices in Canada. And I think obviously the CBC has made diversity a huge priority of their own. And that's probably good, but the CBC can't fully represent that by themselves. We need to see a genuine diversity of viewpoints beyond just the editorial line.
And Mr. Palmer, same question. What would it take to level the playing field and actually make news independent and healthy in the nation of Canada?
I think that the primary tool that's necessary is a truly independent fund which would allocate resources as necessary, especially to the news deserts out there, and to support frontline journalism rather than top-level organizations.
Thank you very much. We now go to the Liberals, Michael Coteau, for 6 minutes, please, Michael.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much to all of our witnesses today. I found the testimonies quite interesting, so I appreciate your time. I often think about the big tech companies, and I know they can be placed into many different categories. We're talking a lot about online platforms, but there's a lot of big tech out there today. And, I was reading in, I think it was the Toronto Star today or the Globe, that Apple just reached a $3 trillion mark. In comparison to the GDP of this country, that's a third larger than the GDP of Canada, just to put, Apple into perspective. And, so these companies are very powerful, bigger than, some G20 countries in regards to its value. So they are major players. And, when I was a provincial member of provincial parliament in Ontario, I moved a bill on the right to repair. And it was kind of shocking to me to see it was the first one of its kind in Canada. But Apple executives and their lawyers came to my constituency office to see me, and I was shocked. I've never engaged in an international multinational corporation because of a bill I put forward in the Ontario legislature. So I got a bit of a feel of how powerful these companies were. Back in the late 1700s, Benjamin Franklin became the Postmaster General, and it placed them at a huge advantage. If you're a publisher, the best job you could have is to control the mail. So he became a publisher and was able, I think in 1774, to start to distribute his paper. Because before that, he wasn't allowed to distribute it because the previous Postmaster General wouldn't allow him to distribute his newspaper. You know, platforms today get to pick and choose what they distribute in many, many ways. And, you know, there was new regulation put forward during Benjamin Franklin's time to remove those conditions and open up the mail system to create fair competition. You know, we're at a stage right now where we need to make sure that, you know, as the internet grows, and I think it was a couple of people mentioned that there's some good sides to the internet and some bad sides to the internet. That we see this as something that, you know, can be used for the betterment of society, and we need to put in place the right type of rules to ensure that Canadians are getting a fair deal from this ever-changing technology. I'd like to ask a question to Ms. Donovan. In regards to higher education in general, I know you had an experience with Harvard, but in general, in America today, how powerful is big tech when it comes to controlling the voice of research?
Thank you so much for the question. I think it needs to be investigated across the board. It's not just the case that Facebook is funding research, but they also are providing contracts to researchers, not just at universities, but civil society. And it's an attempt to make academia and research into a wing of their own PR. And what they have in these contracts, which I think is awful, are kill clauses or veto clauses that say that Facebook has the right to read your research prior to publication and decide if they think that it's met their privacy standards. And privacy isn't just about users, it's also about the products, the corporate products themselves. So if you're a researcher and you want to study the algorithmic impact of Facebook's products, you have to be very careful that you're not also sharing what Facebook would consider trade secrets, or they could shut your research down if they're also funding you. And so my own experience isn't one of just my own, but also there were two other whistleblowers, one at McGill and another at Berkeley, who came forward in the Washington Post just after me. One of them had Facebook called him, one of the researchers at Berkeley had a grant from Facebook. And they called him after he said something critical and said that you shouldn't be doing this. We're friends. And so I think it's really important that we understand that Facebook has executives that have gone out and have taken up positions on advisory boards at at universities across the US and Canada. And they use that soft power and influence to direct research agendas. And so we need a full court press from governments across the globe to understand the web of influence that Facebook has created across academia.
I like the basketball analogy that you just used. So if, considering the scale of these companies, and again, going back to the fact that some of them are bigger than G20 countries in regards to its value in comparison to GDP, if they wanted to intimidate, they have the power to do so, correct?
I mean, they're already behaving like a nation state in terms of their negotiation on C-18. If you're a business that serves the public interest and that you understand that your role in society, especially for Facebook, is to share information with the world, then you have a public obligation to serve the people, and that is the greatest thing that your technology could do. And so I do think, though, that Facebook's behavior as a state-like entity where they feel that they can negotiate at this top level is abhorrent. And the last thing I would say is that there is a $1 billion subsidy from Canadian government going to Facebook, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to the Bloc Québécois. Martin Champoux. Martin, 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. I'm going to continue with Ms. Donovan. The business model for social media, in particular, made of Facebook, the big media platforms. I would like to hear your opinion on the profitability of these platforms. Profitable because they have to let people express themselves freely, because I think that with the less they control what is said on their platforms, that means that they can profit better from this participation. Is that exact?
Was that addressed to me? I'm sorry, I had trouble with the translation. Yes. So in terms of the profitability of these platforms, they are the fastest growing industry. Once Facebook and others figured out that you could monetize the residue or the data trails of users, they turned that into enormous profits, and then also have developed strategies to undermine different nation states and laws in these nation states that have different obligations to ensure that people are well educated and have access to the truth. What I'm arguing is that Facebook has a duty to prioritize accurate, truthful information, and we cannot achieve that if they're blocking all reputable news organizations. And what we also know from research is that when news isn't available, something else fills the void. And in that void, we know that there's much more in different kinds of information, particularly information from bad actors. The last thing I'll say is that technology is the policy. It's not that we have an absence of regulation, but the technology arrives in the world, and if we fail to regulate it, it exists and it makes its own policy. So with Facebook, for instance, it decided that you were going to be able to target individuals with bespoke advertising, which importantly meant that civil rights were going to be violated if you could target certain age groups and earning brackets in order to get your messages across for things like credit and purchasing, health insurance or other kinds of insurances. And so we know that there are broad civil rights effects of the way in which technology like Facebook is designed, and then what kind of services people get down the pipeline. But importantly, technology becomes the policy, and as a result, it becomes very hard for regulators to come in a year, 2 years, 10 years after a product has been on the market and say, wait, now we understand the harms and we want to do something about it.
Merci. Monsieur Palmer, je me tourne vers vous.
Thank you very much. Mr. Palmer, earlier in your presentation, you said that Canada, faced with these giant businesses, is too small to impose its law. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that we can't do that much because we could suffer the effects of those who try to control these companies on Canadian territory? But I wonder what do you believe that we're too small to try and be tough with these organizations? But we do have to try and find a way of being masters in our own house, I think. But how far can we go? in ensuring that these types of organizations respect our territory and jurisdictions, and so that we can try and control these mega organizations, for example, with Quebec culture and Canadian culture.
Vous êtes sur mute.
You're on mute.
Should excuse. Thank you for the question. Yes, I've said that Canada is too small to drive the regulation of the largest of the tech platforms. When you look at the capitalization of the large tech enterprises, it's evident that Canada, some of them exceed Canada's GDP. As a small country, I think that we have to keep in mind very much sort of international and democratic norms. And when we stray from those norms by any great amount, we're liable to run
30
into
seconds.
problems that will see Canadians not being able to benefit for services. So we already have Google, or at least Meta, having withdrawn from the Canadian market with negative impacts for Canadians. This hasn't yet happened, can happen in broadcasting, where we're attempting to regulate and extract payments from online streaming services, some of which have very little to gain from continuing in the Canadian market under certain circumstances. So we do have to be careful.
Please wrap up, please,
We have to work
Mr.
with our
Palmer.
partners. That's the prime thing.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
And for the New Democrats, 6 minutes, please, Peter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for very, very powerful testimony. And Ms. Donovan, you are a folk hero right across North America for the stands you've taken. Thank you so much for stepping up at a time which is quite frightening, where the web giants are producing so many negative impacts. I wanted to ask you, Ms. Donovan, about a specific case. Isabella, who lives in Langley, British Columbia, her son, Jaden, committed suicide after being engulfed in an online website run by a man named Kenneth Law that was provoking, preying on people who are vulnerable and provoking them to self-harm, to suicide. He is dead. Kenneth Law has now been charged with numerous counts of second-degree murder and counseling in suicide. But despite Isabella's best efforts, Google continues to promote the site. And I reference that case and the case of Molly Russell, who killed herself at the age of 14. Her father, Ian Russell, said that she was subject through algorithms to a constant barrage of videos and information encouraging her to self-harm, encouraging her to suicide. Are the corporate executives that allow this, that refuse to crack down on the most egregious predatory behavior, are they liable in some way for the incredible harms that come as a result of their negligence, or one could say their deliberate search for profits at the expense of these victims?
Wow. Just taking it all in here in a moment to reflect on Jaden and Molly, and I'm so sorry for what has happened to them. And, you know, if we think back 15 or so years to some of the problems we had with early social media, it revolved around what we now call cyberbullying, or also online predators that are asking young teenagers for, you know, different kinds of gross material. And what we know from Arturo Bejar, who was the whistleblower on Instagram that recently testified in front of Congress in the US, is that Instagram knew, according to his own internal research. So he was working at Facebook and at Instagram, and he looked at how often children are shown, you know, in different kinds of material, mostly that they were being advanced on sexually, and that they didn't like how open the platform was in terms of allowing people to get to them. And he really wanted to change Facebook. And when he realized that the upper echelons of Facebook and Instagram were not going to change the product because it was going to affect the bottom line, he had to accept some responsibility as an engineer, as a quality control engineer, for not addressing the problems. And I think right now, what we're looking at in terms of content related to suicide and self-harm is that while the platforms do try to tamp it down, it is really a major issue. And once you start to look at self-harm content and you learn the keywords and the tricks of the trade, you can get into that world and the algorithm will continue to send you more of that content. In the case of Jaden, you know, when it comes to a website that is encouraging self-harm and suicide, we've seen this before with a website in the U.S. Called Kiwi Farms, where people would not just encourage but harass trans people into isolation, and then once they felt very isolated, some people did commit suicide. And so I do think that there is a moral responsibility, an ethical responsibility for platforms to build and design better. And there's also a customer service opportunity to ensure that parents know that the place that their children are going online are safe and that there are some adults in the room. And unfortunately, though, we have this perception that somehow moderation on platforms is censorship. It's not true. Moderation is what keeps spam out of your inbox, as well as these kind of bad actors from proliferating online.
I want to follow up on that. As you mentioned, Mr. Ahmed talked about malgorithms. These are algorithms that deliberately stoke hatred. We saw last year every single ideologically motivated mass killing in North America came from the far right. We saw a homophobic attack in Colorado Springs. We've seen racist attacks in Charleston, in Buffalo, anti-Semitic attacks in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, Islamophobic attacks, Quebec City and London, misogynistic attacks in Toronto. All of them provoked by this extensive network of encouraging hate in all its toxic forms. What responsibility do the executives of these companies carry when their algorithms deliberately bring people to these all toxic forms of hate?
30 seconds, please. Peter, I think...
That was to Ms. Donovan.
Yeah, Ms. Donovan.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think that it's really important that we hold these companies to account and make sure that they understand that the consequences of deploying technology doesn't just come with, the PR of innovation, but really that the public and government are going to look deeply at these algorithms or malgorithms and try to make sense of them. That doesn't mean that you put the algorithms into the world and, the 200 data scientists and computer programs that understand them can look at them. It means that we have to invest deeply in transparency and auditing systems that allow for us to really understand what it means to serve information online and why they preference different kinds of information at different times. And so what we know about virality online is that things that are novel and outrageous go furthest and fastest online. That tends to be conspiracy.
Excuse me, Ms. Donovan, we're about a minute over time. You can expand on that with another question later on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go to the second round of questions, and that's a 5-minute round. Once again, 5 minutes for question and answer. And we begin with the Conservatives, Kevin Waugh. Kevin, 5 minutes, please.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair. A disclosure, I was part of Legacy Media for over 40 years. So I sat here during C18 listening to their hardships, bashing Meta, And many of them had agreements behind the scenes that they said little about, non-disclosure agreements. And then when C-18 was actually passed in the House, one of the biggest media giants in this country, Bell, decided to blow off 1,300 of their employees. Again, nothing said. CRTC lacks regulations, said little. And, you know, it kind of was just swept under the carpet. And yet when CBC, you know, a broadcaster and the digital made their cuts, everybody's up in arms. And yet it's the taxpayer that pays most of the bill, if not all of the bill, for CBC. So, you know, Mr. Palmer, you mentioned it before about the hardship when Meta withdrew. But I sat around this table listening to them, and they had certain agreements. And then, of course, when Meta withdraws, then they say, oh, you know, nobody's going to our websites and this and that. You can't have it both ways. And yet these companies, when they sat here, they were in hardship complaining about Meta. So Meta withdraws, and they're still complaining today. You don't think this is constitutional. I did hear you a year ago around this table. What's your thoughts today? Is this online news constitutional or not?
Frankly, no, it's not constitutional. There is no provision in the Canadian Constitution that gives the federal parliament the authority to regulate with respect to online platforms. And none of the legislation is constructed in a manner that would grant that power. So, frankly, no, it is not constitutional.
Mr. Elgee, I give you credit. 10 years building Village Media. You know, you've done very, very well over the last 10 years. But what does, when you say level playing field? So when I was in the media, it was never a level playing field against the CBC. I see their digital news network now that is actually destroying local news in this country everywhere because they have, let's face it, they have the resources where other places don't in this country. So I'm just wondering what level playing field looks like in your view.
Thank you for the question. With respect to the CBC, I mean, I think where there's some role that are important for the CBC to play, certainly having a commercial role is not one. So when it's primarily funded by the government, the loophole that they found to, in particular, compete in the digital advertising space seems unreasonable. I think with respect to a level playing field, the hope is always that if the goal is to support journalism, whether that be through the government or through the platforms, that it be focused on that proportionally and that all players, big or small, can participate in it. I think we find ourselves in a world now, since the passing of the Online News Act, Meta abandoning the industry does in fact disadvantage small players, startup publishers in particular, and is no longer a level playing field. Those, you know, including us to some extent, where we have mature publications, are now advantaged in markets over anyone who might seek to build new businesses in what I consider to be a very entrepreneurial pursuit still today, which is digital publishing.
You know, the budget officer, I mean, I don't know where they got these figures, $329 million. They pulled that number out. Google and Meta were going to give news organizations. Now we're down to $100 million. And that $100 million by Google, who's going to determine where that goes? And I think that's a big concern that we have around this table, that Google, with only $100 million now in their skin in the game, who gets the money and who determines who gets the money? That's the big question here.
Thank you. You've got 30 seconds left.
Well, I give that one to Jeff because, Jeff, you're an entrepreneur. So is that a concern to you, where the $100 million goes from Google and who determines where it goes?
We're certainly highly interested in the outcome. We expect the final regulations may prescribe some division of that. You know, certainly if the full scope of the CBC and the full scope of private broadcast, including Bell and Rogers, is in, then it obviously dilutes what is already an undervalued pot of funds. which originally, at least I believe, was intended to support the traditional kind of digital and print news industry. So it's hard to say, but certainly if the full scope is in, then that pool will be highly diluted.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Time is up. I now go to the Liberals. Mr. Noor Mohammed, Talib, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here. I'd like to, if I might, start with Ms. Donovan. One of the sort of prevailing concerns, I think, that many communities, particularly Muslims, Jews, communities of color, has been the way in which online platforms, particularly X, Facebook, Instagram, and others, have been used as a breeding ground or an amplification force for extreme hateful views. Given the size of these platforms and the limited places online where folks go to access, and I'm not talking about news here, to access content, created content, to access engagement. What is your understanding of, or how do you see the risk profile growing over the course of the next little while for these communities, particularly given the way in which we've seen the influence of bots, the influence of foreign governments, the influence of others in trying to foment discord and hate on these large platforms?
So I began my research on internet network social movements, looking at the Occupy movement primarily. But as my attention turned to white supremacist groups online, I was able to use the same methods that I used to look at online social movements to think about the formation of what later became known as the alt-right. So this networked social movement of certain charismatic individuals, certain moneyed players that were funding this, and it culminated in what my research looks at particularly, which is this wires to the weeds effect. What is it that gets said online that then ends up in public spaces? And I do know that in Canada, there were numerous organizations like the Oath Keepers that were active, as well as the Proud Boys, that formed through not just their own inertia, but also aided by platform companies, allowing them a place to germinate and grow. And since then, a lot of the research in this field has been about removing these bad actors from main stage platforms. I'm particularly unnerved that Musk returned Alex Jones, who I think has a nearly $2 billion fine ahead of him for having maligned and harassed the families and the victims of Sandy Hook. This is scary because this person, along with many others, organized January 6th, the riots at the Capitol. And what we do understand is that platforms aren't just a space for speech. They're also a networking an organizing space for action. And that includes surfacing resources for far-right extremist groups. I've been very pleased with groups like the American group, the organization Color of Change, which launched this blood money campaign in an effort to get places like MasterCard and PayPal not to serve payments to extremist groups, known white supremacist groups. But what we know about platform companies is that for a long time, they ignored the problem. Then when we got them to take responsibility for it, they did hire people to do that work. But now, as the public has shifted, or the public opinion of platforms has shifted, they're not getting any rewards by putting out their information about the transparency related to extremist groups on their platform. So they stop investigating. And this is what's at stake for 2024, is that if we can't depend on platforms to understand and moderate their own territories, that governments like Canada are going to have to step in and say that this is a serious problem.
Well, I'd like to just pick up a little bit of what you've been kind of talking about here. Look, and I'd like to now talk about YouTube. We have had political leaders in this country who have used hashtags in their own search criterion for their videos, and one of them that was used was a hashtag that was misogynistic, that was intended to build out a certain user base and a certain sort of viewer base that was used by now the current leader of the opposition. And I'm curious as to whether or not you can talk to us a little bit about what the implications of that are in terms of what algorithms start to do, and how, when you start to use those hashtags, what kind of rabbit holes it takes viewers down, and some of the consequences of that.
Yeah, so I have been researching YouTube for
Thank you for the question, but we've run out of time. Answer it in another round. Thank you.
Will do.
Now to the Bloc Québécois for 2.5 minutes, please, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur Riklis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Riklis. Very quickly, for a long time, we've seen that all countries have realized what damage can be caused by this type of content that is often found very easily on the internet. And why does it take so long for countries and even the EU, the law on digital services that will enter into effect in January? I mean, it's taken a long time. The United Kingdom adopted a law in October, and in Canada, we have a bill that's been tabled, even though for years we've been working on this topic. Why does it take so long to develop legislation on a subject that is so sensitive and so urgent and necessary?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's an excellent question. I think in reality, what you're pointing to is over the 2 decades during which we should have been regulating these platforms and the biggest corporates and the monopolies in particular, public action has consistently been too little and too late. I think the fundamental explanation of that is what I was pointing to, which is that big outside vested interests create whole ecosystems of thought, influence, and subversion that in the end manipulate society and policymakers. So one gets to the realization of what is happening too late. And when one comes to the act of action, there are very important counter forces that are in play, counteracting the capacity of legislating and regulating. I think these actors are so big, and as was said earlier in the hearing, of such a size today, bigger than the GDPs of many G20 countries. Of course, when money is not a limiting factor, you buy or you try to buy everything. And that is what we are seeing in terms of lobbying, in terms of framing the narrative, but also, as I was pointing to, creating alliances, setting up front groups, astroturfing campaigns, but saying it also very frankly, influencing or buying think tanks and academics. So I think we have a very big problem across the Western world, not only in Europe, not only in Canada, in the US, Australia, and so on and so forth, dealing adequately by the scale of challenge we are facing. I think one point was referred to earlier about the independence of academia. I think we are facing a big challenge in terms of having independent academia scrutiny of this. This is a point that has been raised by somebody called Meredith Whittaker, amongst others. He worked for 13 years in Google as the head of their open research efforts, and then she left to work on AI ethics. And when she was pushed out of the center where she was working, essentially what she says is that there is virtually no independent academic research on AI ethics across the world. So I think these are examples of the scale of and the difficulties we're facing. These companies are systematically, effectively, and extensively using their power and their leverage across the policy debate, and that renders regulatory action very, very difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Riklis. I think, Martin, gone over, but that's okay. Peter, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I wanted to come back to Mr. Hatfield and Ms. Donovan. You were both kind enough to mention and support Bill C-292 on algorithm transparency that is before the House of Commons under my name. We have similar legislation before the U.S. Congress under the sponsorship of Senator Ed Markey. How important is it to have that algorithm transparency? And do you feel that the concerns, the pushback that we're getting from these massive big tech companies is because they realize if the algorithms are transparent, liability then comes for some of the algorithms that have led people to commit real-world acts of violence? I'll start with Mr. Hatfield.
It's critical to get more transparency into how algorithms are working. I don't know if they would face legal liability, but certainly they would face bad press in some cases. And frankly, we're regulating in the dark on a lot of these issues. We truly don't always understand what is occurring on platforms and why. And we need that researcher access to understand it better.
Thank you. Ms. Donovan?
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we get these bills passed. Senator Ed Markey actually lives in my hometown, so happy to be, aligned in that way. But what's concerning about transparency and algorithms isn't just that they can dump a bunch of code and you can parse it for years, but really that we set up a transparency and auditing agency that's role is to look at these algorithms, to be able to take in changes to the algorithm, able to ask questions and query these large companies about what is being served. We also need panel data, which means that we need data that is not about users, but more about the links and the kind of information that is circulating online. So this would be a way to audit algorithms in terms of, well, what kind of news are the algorithms making popular? And again, it goes back to this finding from MIT many years ago about how lies travel online, which is that novel and outrageous content moves further and faster online, not just because of what the content is, but because of the way algorithms mediate our experience with the information that we're seeking. So Google ranking matters if you're going to want to understand a certain issue. And so we need to know how those things work and how it decides, something very banal, like, if I type in salsa on Google, is it going to give me recipes or dance classes, right? We need to know why it's making these decisions and how. And when it comes to people, which our names are all we have, it's really important that we have a way of auditing how our own names
and
identities are shaped online. Thank you.
Now we go to the Conservatives, Martin Shields. Martin, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Appreciate your input as we study this issue. I think in a sense we had 1774 brought up earlier, and I go back to what's called the yellow journalism era, that when newsprint became very, very cheap and it was yellow, the proliferation of newspapers and the territorial wars to get coverage on the newspaper stands was huge. I think we're in a similar time frame. We're into a totally rapid change. So I'm going to go with the open media. When we talk to Mr. Hatfield, will rural, small media survive in whatever form? Can it survive?
Well, it's not looking very good right now, I don't think. I live in a small rural community in Canada, Salt Spring Island, and we're very blessed to still have a local paper, and it makes a huge difference to the way community understands and relates to each other. I think there needs to be a very serious study on whether some level of public support is needed, but we need to take that problem head on as a single coherent problem. And I think some of my concern is, to date, how news is being supported. There's a lot of small, piecemeal, and quite complicated programs all adding up to a pretty significant level of funding. that doesn't necessarily go where it's needed, doesn't necessarily actually close the news gap, but is very non-transparent to ordinary Canadians. And so many people in our country are starting to worry, like, is the news fundamentally beholden to the federal government or to tech platforms? And we need to make it extremely clear that's not the case through a single system that anyone can sort of audit for themselves.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That voice of authenticity in our rural communication is important. Mr. Palmer, your opinion on that same question?
Well, I think it's critical that transparency be at the forefront and independence from government. I'm not sure how one does that, but that is the objective here. And I think that the present mechanisms deny that, do not permit it with any ease, and it's the big players, rather than print journalists, that are going to benefit from what we now know about the Google Fund for Canadian media.
Thank you. And going to Village Media and expanding a little bit on that in the sense, not just those in the sense of small ones that may have been there for 100 years, but we're talking about new as well that are small. Do you see that can it survive in the structure of government-funded big tech running basically what we see and read?
I think, obviously, I hope we're proof that local media can survive and thrive in this environment. When we speak to rural, our smallest community would be about 10,000 people, and we go up to communities of about 150 to 200,000 people. Certainly, we are able to access some government funding programs, which help with our expansion. But I think in the world where we find ourselves now in particular with Meta out of the industry, that the ability to accelerate the launch of a new digital community publication has certainly been significantly set back. And I fear that where I expect we'll see more and more local rural newspaper print closures, the business model now of starting up a digital publication is going to be more difficult. But I obviously we are living proof that it is possible to create these kinds of publications and be sustainable.
If you had one recommendation for the committee that you would like us to see, what would it be?
Get Meta back.
Okay. Mr. Palmer?
I would
30
endorse
seconds.
that. Get Meta back.
Mr. Hatfield?
Don't make news production follow the algorithm. We don't need news that is viral and emotionally activating. We need quality journalism.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Martin. I now go to the Liberals. Pam Demoff. Pam, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Donovan, my colleague, Mr. Noor Mohammed, asked you about the misogynistic hashtags that the Leader of the Opposition had used, and you didn't get an opportunity to respond to that. I'd just like to give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, I have been researching Facebook for a very long time, and YouTube as well. And when it comes to the misogynistic hashtags, it's not just that someone is using a hashtag, but what a hashtag represents is a content tag that allows the algorithms to connect different pieces of content with each other. And so anybody that's using that hashtag might get recommended to you as the next video up. Particularly around misogyny, what we know online is that it's alive and well, that the harassment of women, women of color, women who are journalists is almost of an epidemic proportion. And this is all about silencing women in their online fields. And so we've seen misogynistic attacks, not just political ones, which we do know that women and women of color experience disproportionate harassment, but it can also be a way to foment rage against women. And we know that that has happened numerous times through these misogynistic hashtags that create these online communities. I just want to take 1 second to address something that hasn't come up related to getting Meta back, which is that Canada should be looking at rewarding nonprofit news. Especially in the US, we know that if we were to turn many local publications into nonprofits, that they would stand a much better chance of sustaining their businesses if they were operating in that model, not just in the tax model, but also in the model of what news is for, which is to serve democracies. Thank you for allowing me to make that comment.
Well, thank you for your comments. Mr. Ricoles, I know I probably got your name wrong, but you talked about the funding that big tech is doing that's disguised as something quite innocuous, and it really reflects the similar tactics used by big tobacco in funding research on smoking and vaping, and also the anti-abortion movement funding what appear to be innocuous organizations and crisis pregnancy centers. I wonder if you think that there should be more transparency and disclosure in what big tech is funding.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think those parallels you point to are absolutely correct. This is about doing business in darkness, and democracy hurts in darkness, as we've heard before. And I think, well, first of all, I want to commend this House for doing this study. I think you are picking up a task where other parliaments have failed, and notably the European Parliament. I think a lot of what is going on is the capture of our democratic processes, and to some extent also the corruption of our democratic processes. Of course, corruption has a legal meaning and requires substantiating evidence for that, but it also has other meanings if you look at the dictionary, which is about manipulating processes, creating difficulties, etc. And that's the way I'm using that word. So I think what we've seen in the EU is very much so unacceptable practices of subversion and influence over what is supposed to be democratic decision making. This has been highlighted by the leading lawmakers involved, based on my own, also on Corporate Europe's Observatory's reports on this. For instance, the Digital Services Act rapporteur wrote to the President of the European Parliament asking for action to be taken. But in earnest, nothing of consequence has happened. And I think really the reason for that is that to a lot of the EU's policy making and wider policy and expert community, big tech's influence and subversion practices are, in a sense, an histoire qui dérange, an inconvenient story to avoid dealing with. So in my view, what needs to be done, I think one needs to go much further in terms of transparency. I think tech regulation today, which is often understood in terms of enforcing a strict competition regime or rules to keep privacy invading platforms in check, that is not enough. Regulation also needs to be a struggle against the tech sector's capacity to influence public institutions, civil society, and policy discourse.
Thank you, Mr.
This is what I call
Reckles.
building. Yeah, just finish
Thank
the
you.
sentence.
Yeah,
what I call
okay,
building
quickly.
an effective tech control ecosystem. And for instance, in terms of transparency registers, one needs reporting, I would say project by project, euro by euro, and then interference strategies needs to be systematically monitored and countered. And that was happened again, the pushback against big tobacco.
Thank you. I must ask you to wrap up, please. We're well over time for this particular round. Thank you, Ms. Damoff.
So that involved public research programs and peer-reviewed journals and
Mr. Reckles, I'm afraid we're well over time for your answer. Thank you. To the block for 2.5 minutes, please, Martin.
Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Are we not at the beginning of the next round? No, sir. Sorry.
5 minutes, please.
Fais le
Sorry,
règlement.
Martin,
Je pense
that
que M.
was just
Champoux
like a
s'est
little
trompé.
booth there.
Et c'est son tour puis le mien. Je pense qu'il s'est trompé.
Yeah.
I am challenging the chair.
Who is challenging the chair? Martin is challenging the chair. No. Okay. Oh,
Not really, but I just wish that he hadn't corrected your error.
that means you do not have a 2.5 minute round, Mr. Julian. No. Okay. So, Rachel, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Mr. Palmer, in your opening remarks, one of the comments that you made was you talked about the dangers of getting it wrong. And the dramatic impact that this could have on Canadians. I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit further.
Yes, the danger is that Canada is not an essential market. It's a good market for the major tech platforms, however you describe them, but it's not critical. And so it's perfectly possible for platforms to simply not serve the Canadian market. It's a bit of a danger with the really big platforms like Netflix, for instance, in the broadcasting sector, from the streaming sector. But I think it's really critical with the smaller and innovative services that are coming along. If the price of entry to the Canadian market becomes too steep for new services or for minority services, then Canadians will suffer because those will not align and act in Canada. If they're not available in Canada, then Canadians are losing out. The primary purpose of the internet is to be demand-driven and not supply-driven. The Canadian system is designed to be supply-driven rather than demand-driven. And when that's applied in various sectors, one can see that Canada can lose out, and Canadians, individual Canadians, lose from the lack of access to new products and innovation.
Mr. Palmer, I just want to tap into this a little bit further. You said, choice needs to be preserved for Canadians in terms of their use of the internet. But you also talked about it needing to be demand-driven. Do you want to just explain a little bit more about what you mean by demand-driven?
Yeah. The internet gives the individual, makes the individual the curator of his experience. They can choose to watch videos on Instagram, TikTok. They can watch streaming services like Netflix. They can go for free. They can go for paid subscription, etc. These are all possible. The critical fact is that it is the individual that chooses what they are going to see. The traditional model of both print and broadcast programming content is that it's a push. You get what they're offering, and that's all you get. You can switch from channel A to channel B, but you cannot choose what's going to be on channel A. We get to choose now. We have a vast choice of products and services. We get to choose what we want to watch, when we want to watch it, how we're going to consume it, what platform, etc. And those are hugely freeing and liberating, and individual self-realization steps that are critical, I think, to the kind of society that we want eventually to have. Thank you.
So, Mr. Palmer, in the nation of Canada, of course, within our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 2B, we have freedom of speech that is protected, which, of course, is the exchange of information. At the same time, it would seem that there is some appetite in the country for greater regulation among tech giants. How do you balance that between the internet being this vast and magical space where people have access to information and can curate that according to their desire, and where the exchange of ideas can take place freely, but also, of course, wanting to make sure that people are able to do that in a way that is, I don't know, should they want to do that in a way that is safe?
I mean, safe has a number of definitions here. I mean, it is very difficult to be able to say when it is that you shouldn't be able to access certain information or certain services. And this is a dilemma that lawmakers are going to face and that individuals are going to face constantly and chronically in this space.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. I now go to the Liberals. Anna Gainey. Anna, for 5 minutes, please.
I'll cede my time. I really have no voice.
Are you still having problems with your laryngitis? Okay, Michael Cotto.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to talk to Mr. Rickles. Is that how it's pronounced, George Rickles? Yeah. I wanted to get a perspective on maybe just a bit of a brief on the history of what's taken place in Europe to combat intimidation, and also the spread of misinformation, disinformation, promotion of hate through the different platforms. Is there any advice that you can give us from successes and failures from Europe, and what Canada should really be looking at to learn from what's taking place in Europe?
I think the headline reflection I have relating to this and advice is the idea that dealing with these issues has to be voluntary. Is something that needs to be fought back against. And I think this is very much the story of tech regulation since its inception, in a way, where in the case of platforms, we have in fact been living a regulatory anomaly. If you go all the way back to the liability exemptions in the US Communications Act, Section 230, and the corresponding rules in the e-commerce directive in Europe, this was an anomaly. If you go to the history of how one has been regulating communication, well, there has been two fundamental principles, and one has been to protect the secrecy of one-to-one communications, and the other principle has been to do public interest regulation of one-to-many communication. And of course, there's always been battles around this, but that
Can you explain that further? Can you explain that further? Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't understand that part. Can you explain that? Sorry.
All right, I can try to explain it. If you send a letter through the post office, well, that is private. It's a one-to-one communication. Nobody has the right to open it. And you can write whatever you want. If you are broadcasting something on the radio or on the TV or in the internet, in principle, one should think, that's a one-to-many communication. And there is a very strong public interest in setting the rules, of course, allowing for freedom of expression, and that is constitutionally central in all our societies. But still, the history of our society has been one sets rules for regulation of one-to-many communications. When internet came, when you got the Communications Act, when you got the e-commerce directive, one started creating exceptions from this, liability exceptions. And this is the basic framework that had made it so that if you are a press publisher, you have very strict rules you need to abide by. If you are an internet platform where you are communicating information perhaps to many more people and making much more money from it, you have been very largely exempt for this.
Is that because, sorry to interrupt you, but is that because regulators have failed to keep up with the technology, or has it been a conscious decision to ignore it?
I think it's a mix of that very much. I mean, internet came to us with the idea that internet equals democracy, and let it happen. It will do all kinds of good to our society, and of course, the benefits have been massive in a number of areas. But clearly, also there has been things that haven't been that good, and I think a lot of the ideology that accompanied it has been very strong in convincing lawmakers, policymakers, that one could live by a self-regulatory model, and this is what you have seen has been perpetrating through the history of tech regulation, all the way to this day. Just last week, we got an agreement on the AI Act in the EU, but the reality of the matter is that most of the jurisdictions are going for voluntary solutions. And that, of course, is what
30
all the
seconds.
time tech is pushing for in their lobbying and in their efforts. So if there is any lesson, I would say on the EU side, we have two formidable pieces of legislation now, DSA and DMA, but they're coming 10 years late. And that was because already when the issues of duty of care, for instance, with relation to transactions online, information or commercial transactions online, started being discussed, the answer was always, let's make this
Thank you. I think you're going to get cut off in a second, so I just want to say thank you.
Because we're going to go to the Mr. Champoux, but we have a vote being called, so I would ask the committee if there's unanimous consent to go the next 15 minutes. No?
It's just a chamber. Yeah.
Pardon?
It's just the House resuming.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry. I'm sorry, Martin. Go ahead. 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Actually, in listening to the answers from the presentations and also the discussion that we've been having for a while at the committee, I think that the idea of a fund, as we proposed at the beginning of 2019, I think that would be a good idea, and it's urgent to try to regulate the content and the freedom of circulation of disinformation and harmful content, and so maybe we started with the wrong approach, and so now we have a number of businesses that are armed for combat and are very organized in their opposition to what we might try to do, and we have a difficult task ahead of us with regard to controlling hateful content. I think that's a very, very difficult field. And Mr. Palmer, with regard to the viability of news offerings in rural areas, areas where it's difficult to maintain such activities, how can that be maintained? Who's going to put money into this kind of local news? Yesterday, Rachel Tern from Métis said that news can come back to Métis if there's not any regulation, but I don't think that's a very positive attitude. Do you agree that online businesses should share journalistic contact and with regard to the funds to maintain local coverage and news?
Frankly, I think you're right that a fund would be the best way to deal with the problems that Canadian journalism has at the moment. I think the most significant point is that it needs to be funded across the board. So why did we focus only on Google and only on Facebook? Why did we ignore other platforms? Why did we not require that the levy be broader? And I think that the whole business of private negotiated deals fell apart on scrutiny. And so I think that there needs to be a legally imposed levy upon those who propagate further news access in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
And it should
Peter.
go into an independent fund.
Thank you very much. Peter, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks to all our witnesses today. You've given us a lot of important material to digest, and we greatly appreciate your expertise. I wanted to go to Mr. Rankin, Mr. Kellis. I haven't asked you a question yet. I wanted to ask you two questions. First off, does it make any sense at all that Canada subsidizes indirectly Meta and Google to the tune of over $1 billion a year? This is something that is inexplicable, that we pay businesses to advertise on these two platforms, given the size and scope of the companies. Secondly, what are the suggestions that you can give us in terms of tackling online harms legislation? The government has been very slow to introduce it. It is absolutely critical, given the outbreak of far-right extremism that we're seeing, far-right extremist violence provoked often by the algorithms that we're talking about. What are the lessons learned that we can take in Canada to ensure that we have legislation that actually combats these online harms? Mr. Rankin.
Okay, many thanks for the questions. I don't feel very well placed to answer to the first question because I'm not familiar with the $1 billion dollars in subsidies going to Meta, as I don't know the Canadian situation, but I will go into the second question, and that is on the online harms and how to prevent them. So I think the EU has now put a framework in place called the Digital Services Act, where it should be at least, these online platforms, they need a moderation policy, and that moderation policy should be transparent and should be, to a certain extent, accessible by internal independent audits.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm going to have to ask the same question to Mr. Kellis. I only have 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Kellis.
Sorry?
No? Can you please answer? Mr. Julian is asking you, can we stop that a little bit while we're getting this going? Thank you.
May I simply ask, which of the two questions does he want me to answer?
Both.
Have a lot of time to answer both. You only have 30 seconds, so please do it quickly. Thank you. Yeah.
Pardon me, I need to unmute. Yes, the quick answer is to say I don't have detailed knowledge of the funds and compensation that's being set up in Canada. So it's not for me to comment. I think what I can say in terms of payments to publishers in Europe, that was addressed through the copyright reform that created an ancillary right, which essentially was about creating a market. In a sense, if you give a property right over how content is used online to publishers, well, then you give them a position to negotiate. How has that worked? I think it has led to, in most cases, negotiations, but it is also very clear that in most of these situations, the rapport de force, the relative strength, is extremely unbalanced. So I think what a lot of publishers have come to experience is that when they sit down, say with Google or with Meta around the table and say, okay, how are we going to get paid for our content that you are using? The answer is, well, of course, we're going to pay you, but why don't you buy this service and also this service and be part of this ad process, ad platform.
Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. Can you wrap up, please?
It's a very unbalanced negotiation.
Thank you very much. Thomas, for 5, please.
Mr. Palmer, I just want to come back to our conversation earlier. You got cut off, unfortunately, in the questioning. And then, Mr. Hatfield, I'm going to bring this question over to you with regards to an open internet. My question, Mr. Palmer and Mr. Hatfield, is this. There's a lot of conversation with regards to regulation around the internet, of course, and I think a desire to protect people. What are the dangers when the government involves itself in protecting people from certain ideologies, certain beliefs, certain values, or certain exchanges of information? When the government determines that it is up to it to protect, quote unquote, people from these things, what happens to us as a free society and the exchange of ideas and innovation and creativity going forward?
The question you pose is a profound one, and I'm not sure that I can grow to the size and scope of it. The question is really, what is the boundary between awful and lawful? There's a lot of crap on the internet. There's a lot of misogyny, et cetera, et cetera. But is that speech unlawful? Is it illegal? And should government be suppressing it? And I don't have all the answers on this, but certainly there's always a danger when you suppress speech, and particularly in having government, which has an interest in how people speak, particularly speak about it, are empowered to suppress elements of speech. And that's regrettable. It's a tremendously difficult balance to find, but it's a tremendously dangerous line on which government has to be respectful of rights. Thank you.
Mr. Hatfield?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think lawful but awful speech is a lot of what many people experience daily on platforms that they don't like. There's always going to be quite a bit of that speech, and you really can't regulate away things that are functionally dog whistles. People just find new ways of expressing that. When we're looking at how platforms are influencing the problem, we need to look at to what extent are they reflecting society and to what extent are they amplifying or driving some of these things. And that's where greater researcher access to figure out the question of that is really important. But it's critical that we don't create a very censorious situation where the government is indirectly forcing platforms to remove actually a ton of lawful speech. There's the potential for actually really critical social mobilization and conversations to be affected if we set up poorly designed regulation.
Thank you. And Mr. Algie, I'll just return to you here for a moment. Just with regards to Bill C-18 and the impact that it is having. Now, I should clarify, actually, because Bill C-18 actually Meta opted out because they're no longer carrying news links, and Google had a few demands of the government, and of course the government entered into a back room and created a deal with them. So we now have a Google deal. We don't actually have Bill C-18 being upheld by anyone. And so given the Google deal for $100 million, how does something like this work to the disadvantage of innovative, new, local, independent, or cultural media outlets?
It's difficult to answer that in absence of final regulations and an understanding about how the funds will be distributed, as mentioned earlier, especially when you look at the scope of organizations that are involved. I would say, I will go back to saying that certainly the evacuation of Meta from the industry will, without question, disadvantage many, many small startup independent publishers, because this was, in many cases, the on-ramp to them developing audiences, and it was a very efficient way in which to do that. I think as well with these kinds of programs and funding, because people will have to apply to receive it, it tends to a disadvantage, again, the startups, because people who have been in the industry, including us, will be advantaged because we get access to those funds very quickly, where sometimes the process otherwise can take years potentially. So it is, I do believe the outcome will disadvantage startups in particular.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your response.
Thank you. We have bells for the committee's information. I think that we have another 25 minutes to vote. We have one more questioner, and that's Mr. Nur Mohammed for 5 minutes. Do I have unanimous consent for him to ask his question? Thank you. Mr. Nur Mohammed, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you to the witnesses for being with us. I wanted to talk a little bit, or ask sort of a little bit about online rage farming and the role that platforms can and should play, or should not play, as the case may be, in trying to figure out how to be helpful. Because I think I'm very reluctant. We've heard Mr. Palmer talk about this issue of how far do you go, how far do you not go, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand how easy and quickly misinformation and particularly when it comes to angry sort of misinformation can spread with deadly consequences in some cases. And we've seen people on the left and on the right. We have seen liberal politicians in this country. We've seen some conservative politicians in the country, or their families being attacked by folks as a result of what they've read or seen on the internet, as people sort of build this sense of rage and anger. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about where you see it particularly, and maybe we can start with Mr. Hatfield and then move to Ms. Donovan. If you can talk a little bit about where you see this rage usually coming from, what are the tendencies and what are the trends, and where on the platforms, or how do the platforms rather sort of advantage that, and why? And then maybe Mr. Hatfield, you can start, and then we can go over to Ms. Donovan.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in many cases, it's not that the algorithms are built to amplify rage necessarily. It's that they're built to amplify engagement, and rage is one of the most powerful drivers of engagement. So I do think we need to look at what might need to change in algorithms to discourage those kind of dynamics in some cases. I think we need to be very careful about not translating that into censoring people who believe that they have a very legitimate social grievance at this particular period. Having the government in the position of deciding that people shouldn't be expressing themselves that way is actually quite dangerous. And that's why I think having platforms obligated to explain how they manage content and really report to their users and their regulator, this is what we're doing, this is the risks we think we're mitigating, and actually seeing some competitive pressure between different platforms to learn how to manage some of this better would be good to see.
So
Ms. Donovan, over to you.
Yeah, so when I think about this, I think about classical social movements theory, where people are only going to be motivated to do something in this world if they feel that there is outrage and hope for change. And so often what we see online is with this rage baiting is this call to outrage that then hope in some instances people are hoping will change ordinary citizens' behavior. If we think about the United Nations documentation on the freedom of expression, we have 3 rights with the freedom of expression. Of course, the right to speak. We can say anything whenever we want. We have the right to receive information. That is, when, let's say, a forest fire is happening, we would hope that an information intermediary like Facebook would serve us news about how to be safe. But the last part of freedom of expression that we often forget and matters so much for how we understand social media and algorithmic amplification is that we have the right to seek the truth. We have a right to the truth. And this comes from post-Holocaust political theorizing about, well, what does it mean to seek the truth, and who has purchase on the truth, and how do we arrive at truth? And so algorithms do not care if what you're posting is true or false. And they also do not care if what you're posting is incitement to violence, because that's going to drive the rage, which is going to drive, as Matthew just said, the engagement. And so I think we have to really concentrate on rewarding platforms and also journalism that protects the right to seek information. And the last thing I'll say about that is what we need are rules that make sure that people have talk, which is timely, accurate local knowledge. And those are the building blocks for democracies. Having an informed citizenry that is educated, that has access to our own heritage and histories, paramount in this moment. And what social media has done is really inverted that need for society and commodified it, and then mixed it with entertainment and rage bait.
In the last sort of
Talib, I think we've come to the end of this. So I will thank the witnesses for coming and spending 2 hours with us. Thank you very much. You were very informative and insightful. And I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Yes, Mr. Shields. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to wish Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone.
Well, thank you. You know something we don't know.
Thank you.